Hello.
Hey, hi, Claire. How are you? Good to see you here.
Hi there. I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel, sir, for participating in this session.
Hi, everyone.
My pleasure.
Hello.
Welcome to the session. Before we move ahead, I have a few points for our audience to note. First, please keep your mics on mute, except for the speakers in the panel. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, or you can raise your hands during the Q&A. Without any further ado, let's start with our first session, that is Seed to Scale, Building an AgTech Company from Ground Zero. AgTech, the wave of emerging technologies such as robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, biotechnology, all coming to food and agriculture, is increasingly creating opportunities for investors, entrepreneurs, farmers, and consumers. To explore this and help us build an AgTech company, we have expert panel consisting of Claire Pribula, Managing Director, the Yield Lab Asia Pacific. As the MD, she looks at capitalizing on impactful sustainable technologies towards the food and agricultural production chain. She has been recognized as a pioneer and change agent skilled in delivering significant increases in profitability by leveraging business synergies and innovation to build new companies and corporate lines of business. Claire has extensive business background in new lines of business, sales organizations, and strategic initiatives across Asia Pacific and Europe. Our next speaker is Emmanuel Murray, Senior Advisor, Caspian Impact Investment Adviser Private Limited. Emmanuel has over 36 years of rich and varied experience in agriculture, rural credit, and microfinance, including 5 years as head of operations of an impact-focused NBFC with a portfolio of over 6 billion Indian rupees. He has published over 150 papers and reports and is currently working to build the food and agri startup ecosystem. He takes special interest in working with small and emerging institutions and projects with unstructured businesses. Our next and last speaker is Mandar Mahatri, CEO India, Apex Fund Services. Mandar is an experienced leader with expertise in growing and institutionalizing organizations. He is a passionate teacher and mentor and also a published author. As a strategic thinker, he is highly focused on execution, growth, risk reduction, and talent development. He also has functional expertise in wholesale banking strategy, merger and acquisition, joint ventures, valuation, business or project management, and client planning. This panel of our expert speakers will be moderated by Deepak Pareek, the Managing Director and Chief Consultant of HNYB Tech Incubations Private Limited. I welcome you all on board. Over to you, Deepak. Thank you.
So thanks everyone for this very interesting session. We will be talking about something which is dream of every entrepreneur when he starts his journey, to take his organization from seed to scale. We are having a term unicorn very loosely being thrown at today, right? Whenever we talk about the successful startups. When you see that success for a startup is about creating value for the customer and scalability. And scalability is what we'll be talking today. And we are having a panel of very eminent guests today who have been there, done it, supported organization, understood the DNA of those entrepreneurs who have been able to take their companies from ground zero to where they are already serving millions of farmers or billions of customers. I would start with you, Claire. We would like to understand a little bit more about the work you are doing. The Yield is is an organization which everybody looks with a lot of pride because you have been part of creating tens and tens of awesome startups in this sector. And I would like to understand how you approach this support to startups so that you have been able to have such a good hit ratio. Floor is yours, Claire.
Thank you, Deepak, and happy Saturday to everybody. Thank you, Deepak and Honey Bee, for giving me the opportunity to participate on this panel. Just in order to answer Deepak's question, maybe I just say a few words about what the Yield Lab does, and then my answers are in better context. So we're an early stage seed and Series A venture capital fund. I'm managing director for the Yield Lab Asia Pacific. We have funds in the U.S., North America, Europe, Latin America, and now Asia Pacific, registered at the end of 2019. So we call ourselves a federation of funds. What we do is we call it late early stage investment, which is really poor English, but it connotes a meaning, which is that we're looking for innovation that is registratable or patentable. All of us come out of the industry, so and our network of subject matter experts of what we do is hundreds globally that we can access around whatever science area or business area, and that's kind of the key to our success. We have globally 57 in AgTech investments at the seed and Series A level, and we hope to want to follow on invest with those seed stage. And what we do is in helping these companies get through that valley of death to the other side, if it's an early stage seed investment, is that we have, I hate to use the word accelerator because it's become a term that it seems very finite. And what we do is very bespoke. It's a cadence that's set up between the founder and a 20, 30-year expert. And we feel that the way that we go about what we do with the deep subject matter experts in determining the innovation that we're going to select and then working with these companies through that year, we really never let any of them go, has been the reason for our success rate. So it's that subject matter expertise alignment that has I think has been what's provided the good returns and success with no failures in our portfolio.
Super. I'll have a follow-up question. Are you seeing any specific innovations or areas where you believe that the future lies in and where you would be more keen to support?
Well, yes. I mean, there's the great digitization of AgTech, agriculture is underway. And for us, agriculture is crop science, precision ag, animal health, sustainability, traceability, food ingredients. So we look across all of this. There's some areas that are underserved, and one is aquaculture, which in many different dimensions of aquaculture, which we stimulate with a not-for-profit challenge, which is run as an accelerator, subject matter expert alignment, to stimulate that innovation. So we're looking at some cool things from our challenge that have come out of those 180 applications. So that's fantastic. Also, the smallholder farmers in our world here in Asia Pacific, the innovation that's coming out, focusing on the smallholder farmer, is quite compelling because it's a different landscape. How you're monetizing your innovation is completely different than you are for large holder solutions who can afford to pay for these things. And also, looking at the very long supply chains that exist. Something, blockchain and many things have been talked about in regards to supply chain. My background is supply chain for quite a long time. But yet no one has really been able to crack it on its head. But it's extremely important. These smallholder farmers and also the large ones as well. They're providing the smallholders, particularly 70% of the world's calories and produce, and yet they can't get it to its final destination. So being able to have technology that can enable the farm to fork that the consumer wants, but also to make sure that everybody, all the constituents of the supply chain, get something from this innovation. The insurance providers, those that are settling the claims, the producers, nobody wants to have the finger pointed to them that they're the cause of the problem. You want to be able to know who it is that's responsible for the produce not getting there or not coming in the shape or form that it should be, and also to be able to finance the trade. So having innovation that can do all of that in one go is quite compelling.
Perfect. Super awesome. And this is where I believe, those who are in the audience who are the prospective innovators and having dreamy eyes, look at agriculture with a little bit of pinch of salt. There are a lot of things happening, but at the same time, as Claire mentioned, there are a lot of challenges, right? And those challenges where I believe, I would like to take help of Emmanuel, sir, and understand a little bit more with his diverse experience and understanding, especially in rural economics. Sir, the floor is yours. Please share your views, insights, introduction, whatever I'm like, I would have loved to jump in the audience rather than being on the moderator panel, hearing to the body of work you have done is just phenomenal. So please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pareek, and it's a pleasure to be on this panel today. I think agricultural innovations in the agriculture space in India have been slow in coming. Most of the work was in the public sector for a very long time. And for whatever reasons, I think young people also did not show great interest. But all this has changed over the last 5 to 6 years with large numbers. There are today over 1,000 agri startups in India at a certain scale. There are more than, I think, 5,000 people working in various ways in agri space that I know of, and at least 1,000 startups. And some of them, I think 20 to 30, gain a lot of visibility. But the significant number which are still working in that space, and it's not an easy game to play, undoubtedly. Uh, Two things that I could say about agriculture innovations and startups is one, the connect between agri and tech is something very close. So if you have technology that is built in a lab, how are you going to take it to the farmers is a large question. So that is where there is a disconnect between the two, which continues to exist. The second is a large amount of the money and capital has flown to what we would call the low hanging fruit or farm to fork kind of businesses. And that maybe the efficiency is possible and the results we can get could be quick, but the areas that have been neglected are basically resource efficiencies in terms of water resources, in terms of inputs, reducing drudgery for farming labor and farmers themselves, sustainability. These are issues, I think, where there have been relatively less focus among the agri startups. Farm machinery, for example, tailored for small farmers, is something that needs much more attention than is required. There's a huge labor shortage again in agriculture, although we have a large population. And that makes agriculture unviable for a small farmer. So how do we address that is another issue. Of course, traceability and the related aspects of, let's say, warehousing, storage, farm level processing. These are also issues that require attention. Overall, another thing I think entrepreneurs or young people who jump into this space learn after a few years is that agri startups is a long term game. So you're not going to have immediate successes. It's going to take 2 to 3 years to understand, first of all, and it may take 5 to 6 years for actually being successful in that space. Not to discourage anybody, it's a place full of action, but structurally Indian farming is all about small farmers, and therefore solutions from the West may not directly work in India and need to be tailored to the Indian context. Thanks. With that, I'll take a break.
No, sure, sir, but we are not gonna give you a break. I'll be putting a context around. Actually, we do a lot of research on startup ecosystem across the globe as Honeybee. So we have evaluated ecosystem in Australia, in US, predominantly in California, because that's where the real things happen, right? As well as in Israel and in Southeast Asia.
Right.
Including in India. We found a couple of things which are very I'll say that based on the economy are covering different. For example, California, you find that more than 38% of the founders are PhDs, right? You move to Australia, it is around 22%. You move to Israel, it again goes to what, to 45%, right? Netherlands is above 50%. When you come back to Southeast Asia, suddenly you find that actually it goes actually in single digit. Do you also see that actually reliance on the real research work before getting into entrepreneurship, also is one of the reasons that we are having too many numbers but not too much of scale?
Absolutely. I think that's a very valid point. That a lot of people in the IT sector and in the technology space have come into AgTech without being grounded, and we should not take away the credit from them or they discourage them, but they need to spend maybe a year in the on the ground understanding agriculture before actually. So there's solutions running after problems rather than the other way around. So very important to connect with institutions on the ground, research institutions also. And that is where I think all these incubators, accelerators need to handhold these entrepreneurs who are very, let's say, full of energy, excited to do things, but need direction and need that wisdom which those years of research, the scientists and the academics and agri institutions bring. So, bringing that connect is very important. At the moment, it's missing, but it is something. And I think because of that, scalability has been an issue. Uh, Iterations in trying to customize it is an issue. Revenue streams is a big issue. You know, who's going to pay for your solution is asked much later than while you're developing the solution. So these are all questions that are contextual to India, and that is why I think a large number of agtechs are still not as big as we wish they would be.
No, I totally agree with you, sir. I am the best example of that. I was a tech guy, written books on advanced technology. Suddenly in 2016, thought, let's do something in social impact. Got into AgTech.
Right.
First, after 3 months, I believe that I've created a Tinder for farmers, which will solve all their problems. Launched in Indonesia, totally failed. Farmers said this is total crap, right? So the first lesson was that, you have to do more learning. Right? Went back on drawing board. Started visiting countries, so from Indonesia to Philippines. I've been with thousands of farmers. I've done harvest, understood the pain problem, and after 1 year, we had solution which was appreciated by, from World Economic Forum to UNDP to everyone. So that I strongly believe with you that, in case you don't understand agriculture already, please, all your youngsters who are having this view of being in AgTech, please go to ground. Get your hands in soil. I'll never say that it's getting your hands dirty, because soil is a beautiful thing. I go back to Claire. Claire, actually, there has been a lot of talk in specifically your part of the world, especially Singapore, of proteins, plant-grown proteins. Right? Suddenly, I saw 200 million in seed funding. Wow, right? That's something super awesome. I would like to understand a little bit more about you, from the perspective of bioag. That where do you see, in advanced market, especially whether we talk about Singapore, Malaysia, and other part of the world, specifically North America. How do you see that picking up, and what's your view as a yield lab on those type of innovations?
You're talking about it on the alternative protein space in particular. Is that what your question is about?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well,
yes.
first, if I can just respond to something that Emmanuel said, which was about the level of innovation. I mean, it's really good that there's an uptick in alternate proteins is one of them. From an AgTech innovation perspective, but just the context for the listener in that, in Q1 of 2021, there were, more AgTech deals than ever. Early stage, 380 if you just look at North America, let's just take North America. But compare that against the internet VC space of investments made, it was 25,000. So, so it's still, AgTech is still rather small in relation to where venture capital funding is going. So when you see these upticks around like alternative proteins, absolutely. And Singapore is quite strong in this regard because Singapore, it's an amazing place to be based out of. The government has some amazing programs that are focused on the 30 and 30 initiative to be 30% self-sufficient, in 30 years. And the focus is around aquaculture, around alternative proteins, culture meat, and controlled environment agriculture. So that in itself creates a stimulation, and success breeds success, right? So you've seen some amazing valuations happening. So It's causing more companies to come into alternative proteins. As far as our view, it's a food ingredient and a food play that's one of our pillars, and it's very important. But we also know that there's a lot that has to go into creating alternative proteins. So it's not void of crops challenges. It's not void of mycotoxins on food. It's not void of all these other things that have to happen before you can even create these business to consumer solutions. So we're at the Yield Lab. We're looking at all of it, and that is one component. As we are also looking at cellular meat, but we're also looking at animal health. We're also looking at of the fast-growing protein, which is the aquaculture space, and the inefficiencies that still exist there. And I think for those listeners that are looking at the innovation, as Deepak mentioned, you need to understand the industry, and you need to understand it in a very deep sense in regards to your innovation on what kind of impact you're going to have to that particular area of agriculture, and how measurable is that impact? What's the total addressable market? There are so many things that I could go down a list that we want to see when we're talking to an innovator or a company that's looking for funding.
Get another question, you're in typically seed, pre-seed, and Series A sort of environment. When the organizations or the innovators, they move to the next level, right? Series B, C, and even going to the IPO. What type of, I'll say that the specific characteristics we have seen for those companies which are able to take the leap ahead and jump over the Series B, right? And what's do you see that those audience who are sitting here should keep in mind even when they're starting building of their company?
Well, I think you have to look at where you're going to go, where you want to end up. I, like Emmanuel, say, walk before you run, figure out, have a very compelling value proposition, know that you're going to be in it for a long haul. And this is not, AgTech innovation is not something that's going to be getting to an IPO. As a matter of fact, most AgTech innovation is probably never going to go public. It's going to be acquired. But you're not looking at a quick 2 to 3 years, and you'd be lucky. It'd be extremely lucky. There's no immediate exit. It takes time. You got to plan for it. And so you got to plan for becoming cash positive. You've got to plan for being a business that's going to have a long runway. And then as you go, you're raising funds and you're moving up in regards to getting follow-on investment. But you've got to be a compelling business. And you can't skip. There's no easy button. You can't skip over and just go to a high valuation. You've got to do the hard work. You've got to get an innovation that's got a long runway. You've got to figure out how you're going to scale that innovation, how you're going to make it repeatable. What are the reoccurring revenue streams? You're going to have to figure out your go-to-market strategy. You're going to have to look at how you're going to be able to take whether your solution is complex and get it to where it's a little bit more repeatable or monetizable. You're going to have to figure out how to extend your reach and range. As a small company, you can't just have all direct sales. You're going to have to figure out what your channel strategy is. I mean, this is not for the weak, right? You're building a company. You're not building an exit. You're building a company that's going to have to go through the different stages that any company goes through. I've done a startup, know it. It's hard. And you've got to, but it's about getting the business to stand up on its own and get to cash positive. Hopefully you'll be able to get there, but along the way, you're raising funds. And as the investor sees the level of effort that you've put in and how you're going to be able to capture that total addressable market, then that's when you're going to start seeing investors take attention and want to invest in your company.
Super clear. So audience, it's very simple. Try to make your business profitable, right? So on the way, if you are profitable, you will definitely get good investors to scale it up. Now that I would like to bring Mandar, Mandar has been a genius when it comes to trying to stitch two companies together and get them funded, helping them. So Mandar, your views on how to take companies from seed to scale, and what would be your recommendations that those entrepreneurs who are going to be starting or have just started to take care of few specific things you believe are very important?
Sure. So first of all, my apologies for joining in late. I had just some tech issues in terms of joining, so really, really regret that. I've been listening to Claire and Emmanuel for quite some time, and they've put really valid points around what can be built and how should it be built, right? So, in my mind, point number one, when you are looking at what your consumer base is, please understand your consumer base. So, if you're looking at agriculturist as your end consumer, please understand that historically that agriculturist is using a farming practice which has been prevalent for thousands of years, and they really are not going to change immediately. While they'll have native intelligence in agriculture, they may not be as savvy as you are when it comes to tech. I mean, that scenario is changing, but it's not changing so rapidly that it would create a massive market, right? A lot of innovation and a lot of adoption, which I have seen at least in this space, is really at the end consumer end and not at the agriculture end, right? So what I mean by that is it's the end consumer which is looking at a different way of supply chain. So that's where direct to farm to direct home companies have tried, or it is change in the way a specific substance, protein has been used or end used in terms of organic products, right? So it's very important to understand who your consumer is while you are looking to build and what is that adoption rate with your consumer. Please don't expect any agriculturist to change their farming methods overnight. If you're looking at that specific segment, then in all probability, you yourself need to be a celebrity farmer, meaning, you've taken a 50-acre farm and instead of generating X on that farm, you're able to now generate 20X, and then you go and propound that methodology everywhere, and everybody very quickly laps to it. If you're not, you're essentially an outsider in that ecosystem, and that's what you would be looked from that perspective. So very important to validate that idea, to think through it, right? Very important to go and observe what's really happening, just sit with the farmers, really understand what is their pain point, and then work on those pain points. If you don't do that, you're probably building something which nobody is going to use. So that in itself, and in many of the tech startup, that point is reached much quicker. You probably reach that point in 3 to 6 months, or in the worst scenario, a year. But in agriculture, I think, and I broadly classify agriculture, including livestock and fisheries and poultry, all of those, right? In agriculture, that point probably just takes much longer. So your initial phase is long. You need to be prepared for it. In a lot of cases, the investors will just kind of test you. They will give you very vague answers. They'll be happy for your progress, but they'll not be excited enough to invest in you. So that's point number one. Secondly, as you start to get and as you start to solve for the right problem, the question then becomes of how do you start to look to scale up? What are the channels do you use? Do you start to kind of become a local monopoly in a small locality or in a small area where your startup is set up, and then do you look to replicate that model everywhere else? What are your sales channel? Who are your advisors? Are you also looking to add to more products while you're doing that? And these are some of the things which you'll start to look. And as you make progress, that's when the investors will start to jump in. Many of the smarter investors would want to avoid the very early stage risk, right? And many of them will just wait for some results before they jump in. And finally, all the typical things which apply for startups, your co-founder risk, your product risk, your product market fit risk, if you're building some tech around it, risk related to that, those will also need to be taken care of, right? And if you are able to lay down in a systematic manner all of these things which needs to be built and tie it up with investor funding requirement and with the resource requirement, I think then you're in a much better shape to go and raise capital than anything else.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Mandar, for your views. I fully agree with you that agriculture is a little bit a long shot, right? You have to move out from that 369 model, 3 months prototype, 6 month market validation, 9 month grow up or exit, right? You get in the season itself is 6 months, right? So even to validate a small thing, it's 6 month goes.
Absolutely.
And I've gone through that pain. Fortunately, we never focused on investments. We always focused on becoming profitable. And that as you rightly said, that you get very vague answer. I presented a lot of forums, and not for investment, but definitely to pitch my solution, right? And I found sometime the jury would say that, hey, you have too oversimplified it. At some time they'll say that's too complex. So you are confused that, hey, I said the same thing in two different forums. I got totally different answers. I go circle back to Emmanuel. This is I'll say that little bit of controversy, or also someone with your understanding would be able to elaborate. When you see an venture capital arm of agriculture development bank investing in totally different sort of startups, and then you are having some of the modern venture capitalists who have invested in totally different sort of startups. Now the $1 million question for an entrepreneur is that actually which side I should take, right? Should I go to conservative, let's try to make profit and my profit will ensure investment, or I come with a big bang idea and say that I want to raise $1 million in angel itself so that I can create a business worth $1 billion in 3 years. Where do you see the startup should be, or the entrepreneur should be thinking about?
I I really do not have an answer for that. Uh, but from where we come
Emmanuel, there is a civil war going on that direction today.
yeah. So let me talk about our position as
Right.
Caspian, or me as an individual. We believe in what you were saying, a solution that is profitable and scales in a way that the farmer can afford that solution also. So we are more at the farmer end of the chain, less at the other end, the consumer end. And from experience so far, very few businesses in the agri space or the ag techs are profitable today. The biggest of the big also are not profitable, and there is no sight of profitability also. We really don't know. Unless they keep getting multiple rounds of capital, when they can burn out is a question mark. So that is not the way we believe sustainable businesses can be built. In our view, at a gross level, you need to have a margin on every unit that you sell or every unit of service that you provide. And that to us is the right way to do things. With, I think, the Zomato, IPO, and many others coming, the thesis is being reversed. So actually, we may be old school. There may be a new way of doing business which we don't know. But where we have put our money, again, what we talk and what we say, we have put our money on at least 30 agri businesses. Half of them have not even today raised capital from VCs or PE funds. But we believe these guys are the seriously long-term players who are doing business in a manner that even if the next round of capital doesn't come, they would continue to grow, and they are relevant for the Indian context. So in those kind of businesses, we are putting money. We don't have the kind of deep pockets to put money into large businesses that are burning cash infinitely.
Perfect, Emmanuel. I understand. And as you rightly said, even the 10-year or 11-year-old companies in India, if you still see, they are so weak on their unit economics, right?
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
I would, with especially Southeast Asian context, whether we talk about Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, India, I would request all the startups who are focusing in developing world, right? Please look at your unit economics from day one, right? There is not sufficient cash like in California, where you would like to just burn to get one customer. So be more careful about it. And secondly, also you see that a lot of reliance on development funding, right? From GIZ to Australian aid to US aid, DFIDs, right? They're definitely supporting. They're doing super work, but they'll put money in where you are doing, might not be feasible immediately, right? So please be very careful that don't look at too much of grant and too much of immediate investment, right? Look at the profitability. Now that brings me to the last round of questions. Claire, we'll start with you. Like, can you put some recommendation to the entrepreneurs or the prospective founders and existing founders? Where do you would like to say 3 or 4 things they should keep in mind when they start their journey or when they're on their journey to become a super company?
Yeah, first of all, welcome. I'm glad that you're focusing on this space. If you're an entrepreneur, it's much needed. Please, what we do is we're looking for impactful innovation, innovation that's going to have a huge impact to its subsector within agriculture. As Deepak mentioned, everything's got a growing season, so you're aligned to that. But as you're looking at your innovation, how is it providing impact? Measurably. Also, from an ESG perspective, start now. Don't wait until an investor says, so how are you impacting the ESG goals? And then have a blank look on your face. So start thinking about now, how are you saving, how is your innovation saving water? How is it improving lives? Investors, VCs, corporate institutions, strategics are all going to ask this. But it comes down to still some basics. Understand the problem you're solving. I think Emmanuel mentioned this, and what you're solving it for. How much of the value is being produced that you're capturing within your own company and profitability? If you're saving 30%, let's say, of a farmer's harvest, how much of that are you capturing into your business? Be really clear in your ability to articulate this. This is so important. So, and then from there, as you have lay out to an investor and yourself, what your goals are from a total addressable market perspective. How do you plan to capture that? You need to be able to explain this very clearly and demonstrate it in what you're doing. So innovation that's impactful. Hopefully it's impactful and registratable. So innovation, which is going to be, it's important to us as an investor to look for this. And then the repeatability, how you want it to be sticky, you want to be, not with a lot of customization, so that you can start to really grow and capture your addressable market, and get a reoccurring revenue stream, and illustrate how you're going to go to market very clearly. And these are just some of the things I would advise you to start being able to think through as you're creating your innovation.
Perfect, Claire. Thanks a lot for very pointed response, because that is, I believe, would make it very clear for innovators. And anybody who's from the startup ecosystem, Claire, they're doing awesome work across the globe. The idea of inviting her here was like, connect the dots and see to it the yield lab also start taking far more exposure in India than it was in past, and especially in Gujarat, like in my home state. We are having a lot of innovators, Claire, so I'll keep on pinging you with a lot of business ideas of these innovators, right? So definitely, thanks a lot for being on this panel. I'll go to Mandar next to you, right? You have been always, you don't mince your words. So straight recommendation to the startups and see to it that how they can be in your radar when you are looking for mergers, acquisitions and exits.
Right. So, before I get on to mergers, acquisitions, and exits, right? Just one bit of advice to everybody who is there on this event, right? Unless you have passion for agriculture, don't get into it. Simply because AgTech is now booming, it's a buzzword in India. It's a long play. It's unlike other startups. It's not an easy play. It takes a lot of passion. It takes a lot of effort. In all probability, you may not see any money for 5 years. Right, and I'm not painting a overtly optimistic overtly pessimistic picture here, but that is the reality of the game. Coming back to exits, mergers, acquisitions, see what will eventually happen is that as these startups tend to grow, they will focus either on the innovation, so they will be very good on the innovation side of it and the product side of it, or they will end up being very good in terms of distribution side of it. It's very rare that you would find a startup which is very good on both sides of it, right? So your acquisitions and your mergers will start to happen in an area where your weakness is. So you could have a product company, and I'm just throwing a random example here, which has figured out to modify seeds in a way that it increases your yield by 10x, right? Or it has some way to improve or reduce your resource requirement while farming by a factor of 20, right? Those type of companies might just get acquired by the guys who got massive distribution arms with them, right? They have got pretty much access to every single distribution point, not just in the country, but probably also globally. Though those would be really, really interested, right? So basically, product and innovative companies in all likelihood, the interested players will be distributors who would basically look at it, say that, hey, look, I can add one of these things into my portfolio and very quickly grow the sales by 20, 30x for this type of an idea. The other side, which is the distributor side of it, you would see evolution of models there, and I think those companies are more of consumer tech as against agri-tech. The underlying product might be agriculture, but they are really, really consumer tech. And in the consumer tech world, the playbook is very well defined now. You've seen, and not just globally, even now in India, whether it's Zomato or guys like Grow, which are in fintech world, or Paytms, right? And it's matter of just then figuring out how do you build that consumer tech within the agri space. Those either would go into over a long period of time into a listing space, or those would become very, very interesting for your traditional companies, meaning people with traditional distribution channels. So these are the two broad ways I would imagine an exit would happen. We are so early in the cycle on AgTech that I really don't expect any big so-called IPO listing over next 5 to 7 years from this space, at least in India. Globally it might still happen, but India, I've got my doubts.
No, sure, I understand totally with you, Mandar. Like, IPOs, AgTech, definitely you might be seeing again, as you rightly said, that in supply chain innovation, distribution innovation, which is more related to customer, there you might see, at least I see a couple of them. But as they work in agriculture domain, they love to call themselves AgTech. So that's fine. That's fine. Totally. And that also gave a boost to the the overall ecosystem, right? When you see that, two unicorns coming from AgTech, right? Maybe they are not even.
Sorry.
Yeah.
While you talk about supply chain and distribution innovation, and while you say that they like to call themselves AgTech, I still believe they are AgTech because they're solving a very important problem for a agriculturist, which is how do you sell your products. You today unfortunately see situations and newspaper reports where tomato farmers would dump truckloads of tomatoes because the pricing is not right, or where fruit farmers would dump their fruits, right? So it's very important to build that strong supply chain for farmers, right? All of us are aware that essentially within this segment, the middlemen end up eating 80% of the value within the system, and the unfortunate sufferers are both consumers as well as agriculturists. So if somebody is able to kind of reduce that, I think that in itself will be a great service to this industry. And now with technology available, and now with playbooks available in other areas, it's just matter of now not really even innovating, copying the innovations from other areas and building it up very quickly.
No, surely, Mandar, we'll catch you on this offline because I have totally different views on what you just said of your middlemen. Middlemen make actually agriculture sustainable. Without them, you won't be able to do anything. So we will have this offline. I have counter views because we have lack of time. Otherwise, I would have continued on that. Emmanuel, in couple of minutes, your recommendation to the startup and the innovators.
Yeah, I would still, I think, let people enter and try their hands. So I would not discourage anybody to get into this space. If you're excited about it, please make a try. And I think there is quite a bit of capital in terms of government programs, incubators giving grants for you to do those early experiments and then see if this is the space for you to work in. And I see a large number of solutions from India, especially on both the service side and the technology side, like traceability or testing, quality, these going global. because I think we can offer solutions at a quarter of the price which any American or Israeli startup can offer, with as good or better efficiency. And that is where we'll see a great deal of innovations happening very successfully in India. The other innovations that are happening is across the value chain. So there would be transformation in some of these. I think we are seeing it in meat and these places in a bigger way. But other value chains also, like sericulture, dairy has also seen quite a bit of innovation due to startups. But other value chains also, poultry, will see transformational change in terms of quality, in terms of traceability, in terms of hygiene, and all these relevant factors, which will add to both productivity, better returns to farmer, and making that particular activity itself more viable for more people to venture into. And I think the small farmer focus has to remain. So Indian agriculture will be a small farmer ecosystem, and we need to. Things may not automatically happen in that space. Funds will not flow there. To an extent, I think impact investors like us have to devote more time there, even if the returns are lower, and that's our interest. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on the panel.
No, Emmanuel, I strongly believe that smallholder farmer has to be at the center of whatever we are doing, especially in developing world. There are no two doubts about that. Livelihood is as important as the food security.
Absolutely.
So with that, I would thank all the panelists on this panel. Harshidi, I think we have not overshot time by too much.
Yeah, I know, that's fine, but can we take this one question? We already have it on screen.
Okay. What are the innovations needed to promote aerophonics agriculture practices in urban and peri-urban regions? Okay. Now, that's a very interesting question. Let me try my hand on that, because we have worked on hydroponics and those type of things. See, definitely, like, you are able to shorten the cost to deliver to the urban area, right? That helps a lot. But whether any of the control environment technology, whether we talk about hydroponics, aerophonics, aquaponics, you name it, right? There comes with a lot of investment, and then you have to be very clear that actually you're going to just keep on growing herbs and spinach and be profitable, right? So still, I say that the jury is out. Definitely, you see a lot of innovation happening in Singapore and in Dubai when it comes to millions of dollars are being invested in these vertical farms. India, I'll say that's still in nascent stage. Looks interesting, but I'll say that we are having close to, I'll say, 40 plus agroclimatical zone. Let's grow everything outside. That's my view on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
thanks,
you.
Deepak. Lovely to meet you, Claire and Emmanuel.
Thank you, Mandar. Thank
Thanks,
you, Emmanuel.
Harshidi.
Have a good rest of your Saturday.
Thank you so
Innovating.
much
Bye.
for joining us and having this thoughtful discussion. Thank you so much. We'll see you backstage.
Keep
Thanks, bye.
innovating. Bye-bye.
Bye.